Well, hello, everybody. It's Mike here. I just want to welcome you back to Mr. Cast Iron, and I don't really need to introduce these guests, but I will. We got Mac with Small Town Texas Barbecue, Misty from Mama Z's Texas Kitchen, and Grilling and Chilling with Coleman. All three of these folks hail from the great state of Texas. Of course, I'm here, Mrs. Cast Iron's sidekick here, riding shotgun. So we appreciate everybody here. I see Pickles is in the house here. Charlie, if you'd like to get on here, you can click on that link there, and we're just going to kind of talk. Just roughly want to let everybody know in full disclosure real quick what we're doing here. I had a cancellation for our guest tonight, and he's fallen ill, and his children are too as well. So he had to cancel out, and we almost didn't have a show at all. And we decided to go ahead and do something in remembrance of what happened 20 years ago on 9/11, but not only 9/11, but what took place on 9/12. And so I reached out to several of my friends here. All you people pretty much know everyone that's in the chat room, but if you're watching on the replay, these folks are great cooks. They're on YouTube here all the time. And I heard somebody just pop in. Where's that at? There he is right there. Okay, we've got another guest coming on here shortly. But anyway, I just want to disclose real quick. This is just going to be a discussion amongst us about what took place on 9/11, 2001, and how we reacted to it, where we were at, and the things that transpired from the time after that for the next day or so in each one of our lives. So if you have any comments or questions, be sure and pop them in the chat room. We'll try to get all that up on the screen here from time to time. We're going to try to talk to each one of these guests individually and kind of get their take. But if you don't mind, I will go ahead and open up and just kind of tell you. By the way, I'm Mike. I'm Mr. Cast Iron, and we got my sidekick here, Mrs. Cast Iron. She may disclose a little bit of what she went through. She may not. She said, "I don't know if I can do it without crying." And I mean, crying is allowed here tonight, folks. I just want you to know because this was a sensitive. Putting it mildly, this was a sensitive thing for many people. I know personally. Most of you know that I was a long haul truck driver for many years, and then I sold out in 1999. I moved from Texas. I moved back here to Arkansas to be closer to my mother and dad in their latter years. I sold my trucks and I bought some rental houses, rental property. I grew up as a child as a construction worker, contractor, house builder, home builder. Third generation. My dad built houses all of his life. His dad built many himself and other buildings. But I went back into what I knew, and what happened to me on 9/11 was, as most construction workers do, usually they have a boom box going on the construction site. Well, on this particular morning, I was actually starting a new home. Somebody's here. Starting a new home for a couple here, and I was laying concrete block on the foundation. My bricklayer wasn't able to make it, and so we were trying to keep the job site going, and it was something that I knew how to do. So we were laying concrete block on the foundation of a brand new home, and the county water guy showed up in his pickup, and I had a young man working for me at the time. It was just he and I, and the gentleman pulled up in the pickup truck, and he'd been by many times. He knew generally we had the radio going, and trying to keep the good rhythm going, just kind of help the day go by as you're working. And he said, "You guys don't have your radio on today, do you?" And I said, "No, sir, we sure don't." He said, "Well, you might want to turn it on." I said, "Oh, yeah? Why is that?" He said, "Well, just go ahead and turn it on." He said, "There's been an attack." He said he didn't say that. He said there has been a situation in New York City where a plane flew into one of the World Trade Center towers. And I said, okay. So we got the radio out and we started listening to that. And I immediately just pretty much shut the job down. I told Marshall, I said, let's start cleaning the tools up. And we sat and listened to the radio. I called my wife at the time. It wasn't Mrs. Castiron, but anyway, that's another story. That's a horse of a different color, but that's a time for another discussion. But anyway, I called her and I said, have you been watching TV? And she said, no, I haven't. And so I said, well, apparently you might not want to turn the TV on because apparently there's been a situation in New York City. And so she did. And we got everything cleaned up, picked up all of our tools, got everything squared away and cleaned up. And we come back into town, which was only about, I don't know, it was 6 or 7 miles from where I live. And just was glued to the television, just sit and watch, repeatedly over and over. I mean, it was just 24/7. I mean, just news, talking about what happened or what might happen. And of course, folks, I just want you to know this is not going to be a political discussion, and we're not going to allow politics in the chat room or anywhere. But this is just basically from through our eyes is what I've asked our guests to discuss with us tonight. So we appreciate them being here. And like I said, if anyone would like to come on and share their side and their experience of what they went through, you're certainly welcome to do that. We've got the link in the chat room. We'll continue to post that there. You just click on it. It'll pop in and let me know that someone's trying to get into the room, and we'll allow you to come on. We can have up to 10 people. So, with that being said, I just want to continue on and say, for the next so many hours glued to the television, thoughts just went through my mind of what do we do? What's going on? From a man's standpoint, how do we protect our loved ones was my first thought. What do we do to prepare for this? What are we looking at? We had no idea, what to expect next. And we were listening to everyone. We were listening to the people in positions at the time to kind of see which direction they were going to go. But we really didn't know, but we needed to take care of our own here. And so the very first thought that I had was my Boy Scout background. And I know Coleman will appreciate that. But my Boy Scout background kicked in, and I thought, well, I've got to get gasoline. We've got to get our vehicles gassed up and prepared in case we need to move, go somewhere, and we need to make sure we had food. So I immediately jumped in the vehicle, took off toward the gas station. And, many of you know that I live in a town here of only 3,700 population. So, there's only 2 gas stations. When I got uptown to the gas station, the line was backed up almost 1.5 miles. Now doesn't seem like that long for maybe some of you guys in the city, but for us here in a little old podunk redneck town, I mean, nearly half the town was in line to get gas. And so, there we were, we sat in line, we were able to get gas, plenty of gas in town. So we were able to fill up. And, we were prepared that way, made sure we had food. We had a cooler full of food and everything. And so we just continued to watch to see what was being said, what was going to be done. And so I'm going to let some of these other folks speak and tell their story, leading basically just on the initial start of this was 9/11. And then we'll come back in a little bit after everyone's had a chance to speak, and we'll talk about 9/12 and things from that point on. So, ladies first, I'm going to let Misty with Mama Z's Texas Kitchen, if she doesn't mind, kind of.
Not at all.
Maybe if you will, Misty, just introduce yourself to everybody in our chat room and kind of let us know a little bit about what you experienced that day.
Hello, I'm Misty with Mama Z's Texas Kitchen. My experience with 9/11, I, at the time, was a correctional officer in North Texas at a state jail facility. And I worked the night shift. Also had a 5-month-old baby daughter. I was a single mom. It was just me and Kendra against the world, so to speak. And she had woke me up that morning hungry, and I had a big overstuffed chair that I'd just get in the chair with her and feed her and usually fall back to sleep. So, but I turned the TV on that day. I normally didn't even do that, but for whatever reason, I turned on the TV that day, and probably within 2 minutes saw the second plane go into the second tower. And at first I thought I was watching a movie. I really did. And I thought, wait, it's like, what our time, 9 something in the morning, that this isn't a movie. This was NBC, the Today Show. So I picked up the phone and I called my mom, and I'm like, what in the heck is going on? And she said, well, we're under attack. I sat there for the rest of that day, and I had to go to work that night, but I sat there for the rest of the day clinging to my child and was like everybody else, just in shock, because then the towers fell, then the plane in Pennsylvania, the Pentagon, all that happened. And I knew that I had to go to work that night. And I knew I needed to probably get some more sleep, but there was just no way you could go to sleep after that. You were just glued. And that night I had to take my daughter to the setter and leave her. And that was this, because it was like all hands on deck. They were calling, even if it wasn't your shift, they were calling everybody in, because they had to separate the Muslim population from the general population, because there was already death threats happening, right? So I had to leave my daughter that night. That was probably the longest 12, 16-hour shift I'd ever worked in all the years that I was out there. And when we got there that night, like I said, we had to separate everybody, right? Because we basically had to put the Muslim population in protective custody. And something that always stuck out to me, there was this one guy. He is American-born Muslim, but he looked at me, and inmates will tell you whatever, but this guy was so sincere and so devastated. He kept telling him, my name was Shepherd at the time. He's like, Miss Shepherd, this is not who we are as a people. Please believe me, this is not who we are. And just over and over and over. And I finally kind of got him to calm down. And I said, I understand that. Right now we've got to focus one day at a time. So it was just, they had locked the prison down. We stayed on lockdown for a month, I think, after that. But for me personally, just the agony of having to leave my 5-month-old baby and not knowing what was coming next. We just didn't know. I mean, we only lived an hour from Shepherd Air Force Base, and we just didn't know. We didn't know who was next, what was next. And it was just, of course, when you're on the job, you can't even watch the news, right? So there was a whole, I think I pulled a 16-hour shift that night. There was a whole period there that I didn't even get any updates. All we focused on was what was happening at that particular moment. And I remember getting off work and going picking my daughter up, and just it was horrific.
Wow. Yeah, it's amazing. I can't imagine from your standpoint being a mother like that with a child. I mean, Teresa, I don't know if she can stand to tell a little bit. I wish she would. She has you can do it, can't you?
Not right this moment.
Okay. But similar, I mean, as far as a child and everything, Misty, Teresa, but I'll leave that for her just for a little bit. But yeah, it's unbelievable. I'm going to pull Mac, you care to go next? I'll save Coleman for last here.
Yeah, that's fine. Like I was saying earlier, Mike, I was actually working at Verizon. And by the way, my name's Mac, Small Town Texas Barbecue. I'm in San Angelo, Texas. And I had moved back to San Angelo in 1997. Started working at a little bread store and wasn't making a lot of money. So had a friend from church saying, hey, they're hiring. So at this company, which was GTE, General Telephone. And so I ended up working there in 1998, started part-time, then went to full time. Within 2 years, I was in management. But I get up there, and when this all happened, we were one of the quote unquote taller buildings, or not the tallest, but one of the taller buildings in San Angelo, Texas, and seven floors, which is not a whole bunch, obviously. I mean, but I was actually in an elevator when I heard what happened. There was a lady named Patty that I'll never forget, and really, she didn't know exactly what happened because her exact words were, "They bombed the World Trade Center." Well, I had known, way before that the World Trade Center had been bombed, I think 2 or 3 times. And it was like old hat at first because, well, they did something again, and, we didn't know what was going on. And then, at that point in time, that building was filled with probably a good 3,000 to 4,000 people, from what I understand. It's since, there's less than 200 there now because jobs moved away to other cities and stuff like that. But at the time, we had tons of people, so the elevator was filled up. So you would have to wait. You'd have 10, 12, 14 people on the elevator. Well, Patty starts telling us that something has happened, that it got bombed. And so that was the first thing that we heard. After that, I was actually going down to break at the time, and they had TVs on in the break room, and everybody was surrounding the televisions to find out what was going on. And at that point in time, the first one had already hit. But I think during the time that we were actually watching was when the second one hit. And I don't remember the exact times, but people were glued to those TVs there in the break room. And the break room there actually was like a cafeteria and all kinds of stuff. So there's probably a good 50 or 60 people down there looking at the TVs. Needless to say, lots of people's breaks went extremely long that day. And I immediately was just wondering, what in God's name is going on? That's the first thing I thought. And, I was thinking about, my little ones. In 2001, I had Kendra, who's now 25, and I had JJ, who's about to be 23 next month. We didn't have Jonah yet, but he didn't come till 2003. But I'm sitting there just wondering what in the world is going to happen to, my family. What is going on right now? Why is this happening? And what is the actual situation? And in the beginning, I didn't realize how bad it actually was and what was being done to us. And so, with that same day, the whole day, I was just dumbfounded, nervous, thinking, I'm working in this tower, in this building, and I'm just thinking, are they targeting these types of buildings? And the thing is that Coleman can attest to this. Goodfellow Air Force Base is here. I've always heard it called an intelligence base. So I wondered, are they going to start attacking bases or towns where, these Air Force bases are that handle intelligence? Because I thought it was like a full-fledged attack that was starting with that. And so that whole day I was concerned. My little ones were, either at daycare or babysitter or something like that. And so by the end of the day, I was actually at church because our pastor had called, I think, everybody in and says, hey, let's get together and pray. And that was basically the response. People were just weeping, and people were, on their knees, just crying out to God and saying, hey, Lord, help us. We don't know what's going on. You know what's happening. And I just remember how distraught people were. And so that was really difficult to see, just how distraught people were. And, I remember my heart was really broken because of all that. I've never been to New York. I don't know a whole lot about it. I have friends from New York. Our kids' godparents are from New York, and so for them, we were close friends, and so it was very difficult for them too because of all the family that was there. But that's basically how we went through, and just watching everything over and over on the television just kind of, brought the point home with us that this is something that's very serious. And I think something changed in me that day. I just was thinking like, wow, what is the story with this? Why did this happen? And it still hurts inside when I see that stuff. So I have to be honest and say a lot of times when all of these things come up, I shy away from them because I don't like to feel the way I felt that day. I just don't like it.
Yeah.
Well, that's good, Mike. I appreciate you sharing that with us. We've got another friend of ours, Mr. Lee Hollenbacher, back in here with Smoking Bears. But folks, before we pull anyone else on here, I just want to remind everyone here in the chat room that this is a discussion about what took place on 9/11 through our eyes. This is not a political discussion. We're not looking at political or military issues or anything like that. So please refrain from that. And but if you would like to join our discussion, I've got the StreamYard link in the chat room. You can certainly do that. You can click on that link and it'll prompt me that you're trying to come in, and we'll be happy to hear your story. Matter of fact, we would love to hear your story. And I just want to pop one comment. I haven't welcomed everybody in the chat room, but we do welcome you here. We're not going to talk so much about that as we're going to allow our guests to talk tonight. But Wendy said she lost a family member on that horrific day. He had a meeting in the Tower 1, and unfortunately, he was early. So our hearts go out to you, Wendy, for that. And but, I'm going to go ahead and pull my buddy Coleman on, and then we'll get Lee and let these two gentlemen tell us what took place initially when they heard what happened on 9/11. And then after both of these gentlemen have talked, we'll come back and share something with you and talk about what happened on 9/12. So Coleman, if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and pull you up and let you tell us a little bit about your experience.
Mike, I appreciate you setting this up. I think it's important that we, just like on your thumbnail said, never forget. And I think it's important that we don't.
Absolutely.
Everything changed on 9/12, and sadly it's changed back, but I think everybody changed that day. And that Tuesday morning, everything started, just like it always had. I own it. Oddly enough, Mac, we were talking before the show, you and I were in the same town. We live in Texas now, and we live on opposite sides of the state now, but you and I back on September 11th, we're living in the same town at when the attacks happened. And you mentioned you were in the GTE building, and my house was a block and a half away from that building. And I was actually at my office. I owned a business there in San Angelo, had a couple offices there. And I was in the telecommunication business, and I catered more to the oil field. And I was in my office that morning. And I was married at the time. No longer married, Mike. You and I are in the same situation. I'm not married to the same person I was back then. And I had 3 kids at the time. My kids were 9, 7, and 5. So my kids were at school. My ex-wife at the time, she was at home. She was a stay-at-home mom, and she was home, and I was at the office, and I had probably 20 employees in my office, and I had 2 or 3 brand new sales reps that had started that morning, and we were in the conference room, and I was doing some sales training that morning, teaching them the business. And I remember, this is back when cell phones had just started getting text messaging, and I remember getting a text message on my phone from my wife at the time, and said something to the effect of, "Hey, a plane just hit a building in New York," and and that had happened before, and those little twin engine planes sometimes are hitting stuff. And I remember years ago a little plane landed on one of the streets in New York City, and so I didn't think much of it when she said that. And then my office manager came in and said something about, no, it was a big plane that hit the World Trade Center. I'm thinking, man, how does something like that happen? I mean, how do you hit a plane? I mean, how do you hit a building?
Yeah.
We continued on with our sales training and didn't think much about it. And then my phone started really blowing up. I mean, I had a lot of my friends were texting me, and my wife at the time was calling me, and I was in front of my sales reps training, so I was really kind of ignoring it. Then my office manager, her name was Michelle. Her and I are still really good friends, and she actually came into the training room and said, "Coleman, something's happened. Another plane hit. There's something going on, and we need to take a look at this." And so I think I had a TV in the training room. We had a couple in the office, and so we turned on the TV, and I think the second plane had just hit the second tower, and we were watching as the third plane hit the Pentagon.
Mm.
And at that point we knew that there was something going on. And at that point I looked at all my employees and I said, we're in the communication business and we're going to be needed right now, especially being in the oil field communication. Our customers are going to need us right now, but I'm going to give you the option. I'm going to give you the option either staying here or going home to your families. And I called my wife at the time and I said, you need to do whatever you can. You need to go get the kids, and you need to get them, and you need to bring them here to the office. So she did that. She went and picked up picked about 3 of our kids and got them to the office. And about half my employees left and about half of them stayed there in the office. And we just kind of glued ourselves to the TV that day. And, we had a lot of our customers that were calling us and saying, hey, our cell phone, our communication is still going to work, and what's going on. And, Mac mentioned earlier that we had a local Air Force base there in town, and it was an intelligence base. It was also a firefighting training base. And, it didn't have an airstrip. It did have an airstrip, but it wasn't really functional, and my first thought was, we're close to an Air Force base. Is this something that needs to happen, or do we need to get out of town?
Right.
At the time I'd already considered, if something happened, where are we going to go? What are we going to do? And, so we worked on, took care of all of our customers that day and made sure things happened, and they were all taken care of, and communications were still up, and we did everything we needed to do. I kept my ex-wife and my kids at the office with me that day, and we just made sure everybody needed what they needed. And we just took care of everybody. And, and my wife now, Mike, I don't know if you want me to talk about this part or not, but do you want me to go into that?
Yeah, you can go ahead and do that, and then
Okay.
we'll pull Lee on here shortly.
Okay. My wife now is from New York City. She was born in Manhattan and raised there and lived there most of her life. And she, she was actually living in New Mexico when the attack happened. I didn't know her. Of course, I didn't know her at the time. I was still living in Texas and didn't meet her till 2005. But she has a lot of her family are actually police officers in New York City, and three of those family members were stationed in the World Trade Center, and they were scheduled to be in the building that day.
Mm.
And one of them had an arrest because there was a mall underneath the World Trade Center, and he had made an arrest the day before, and for some reason he had to stay late for the paperwork on that, that allowed him to come in a little later the next morning. So because of that late arrest and having to come in later the next morning, he wasn't in the building. He was scheduled to be, but because of the late arrest, he wasn't in the building when the planes hit. Another one of her family members was living in New Jersey and was on his way to the building, and there was an accident on one of the bridges, and he was stuck in traffic on one of the bridges and watched the plane fly in, the first plane fly into the World Trade Center and hit it. So he was stuck in traffic that day. The third one, I'm not sure why he wasn't in the building at the time, but all three of them were scheduled to be there. And her niece, there's a private school that's right at the base of the World Trade Center, and her niece was in school. She was actually, her sister lived in New York City up until just a few years ago, and my wife's niece was in school that day, and when the planes hit. And when the first plane hit, they actually had all the students come out on the sidewalk. And sadly, all the kids stood there and watched people jump out of the building. And when the building started collapsing, they were able to get out and evacuate quick enough, but the building collapsed right on top of the school they were in. So, it's pretty heartfelt for my wife. It was a big event for her because it directly affected all of her family. I mean, my wife hung out at that building as a kid. I mean, that was a big part of her life.
Well, Coleman, I appreciate you sharing that with us. I'm going to go ahead and pull Lee on here and let him give us his view of what took place the morning that he was made aware of what happened and how he reacted to it. And we'll pull Lee on here. So let me see if I can pull him up full screen. Hey, buddy, go ahead if you don't mind. Share with us a little bit. How you feeling, first of all?
Pretty tired. They got us doing a lot more walking around and whatnot, and stepping down the pain medicine.
Yeah.
But we're doing it. We're moving forward.
Well, I know. Just let you know, everybody. I'm sure in the chat room would agree with me. We're keeping you in our prayers and everything, and you just keep your head up. And if there's anything any of us can ever do, we'll certainly be more than happy to try to help any way we can. But we appreciate you agreeing to come on with us and kind of let us know where you are at. Introduce yourself maybe to everyone that may be watching this on a replay or whatever, and kind of tell us how things went for you on 9/11.
Well, my name's Lee. Me and my girls have a YouTube channel called Smoking_Bears_. And here lately we're just doing cooking videos on Sundays, kind of giving updates of our week and just hanging out. But 9/11, wow, that was a crazy morning. Worked night shift, and I actually had a dentist appointment that morning. And my sister-in-law came in and watched my oldest child, who's at the time my wife and I were just dating, and my wife was working day shift at a bank. And my sister-in-law came in to watch the oldest one because she was only like 2. And I went to the dentist office, and before I was back in the room and before I could see the dentist, they came in and said, "You got to go. We're canceling everything." I was like, "What's going on?" And they said, "This plane just hit the Trade Center," and I got to actually watch it on screen in the room. And I was like, "Holy cow." So I get in the car and I haul home, and I was able to watch the second plane with my sister-in-law. We watched the second plane hit, and it was just a complete loss. I mean, you were just like in awe, just going, "Whoa, what's just happened?" And then you start watch them fall, and just the mass pandemonium, and it was crazy. And you had this right after that, all that stuff. You're trying to get some sleep because you got to work that night, and part of you wants to do the man thing and get up and take off and drive to New York and try to help out. But then the other party says, man, you got a young family right here. And my wife and I have been dating not even a year. And, you know, it was like, I can't just up and leave them not knowing what's going to happen.
Right.
And of course, that's when all the, everybody started putting flags on their cars and hanging the flags up. We were in an apartment, so we hung a big flag up, and I've still got the original flag that I hung outside the apartment, hanging in my garage, and the flag that I put in my car window. I had it strapped to the antenna for a long time, and then I actually hung it from the roof of the car inside the mirror. I still have those.
Right.
That was it's still amazing when you watch some of the videos and the replays on History Channel. That it's just amazing. Just
that it brings up of the patriotism that just poured out after that was amazing. I mean, you just see everybody that didn't know anybody came together for one cause, and it wasn't all hate either. It was, yeah, you had a lot of the crying out and all that stuff, but you still had a lot of people that were in support. And I mean, you just see people in the store would walk up and would just hug somebody. You know, you never saw that. And it was just that made me aware of what it was like to be an American. That right there. You know, that it was more than just, you know, the wars, the Vietnam and all that stuff. That it was, there's a support group that you don't even know. And that was amazing. And my younger daughters, you know, they know what's happened. We've watched the movies. We watch all the stuff because that's an important part of where we are now as a nation.
Yeah.
And you know, my oldest one, she was 2 at the time, so she doesn't really remember it. But she's been well versed in what's happened and what's going on with it.
Yeah.
That's been it's mind blowing that it's been 20 years already. Seems like yesterday. You know, I can still visualize, you know, like Colin was saying, the people jumping out of the buildings. You see the planes hit, and the thing that really stuck out the most was the stories, not of all the people that passed and all that, but it was all the people who didn't go to work that day.
Yeah.
Where they got a gut feeling that said, stay home.
Right.
You know, that this was the one day they took their kid to school. You know, something told them to stay home that day.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's that gut feeling that you can easily miss, you know, and, you know, when you hear all the blessings and the stories that come out of that. Actually, one of my brother's best friends, who was 4 years younger than me, he was going to school in New York and was actually on the building, the roof of the building where he's at, several blocks away, and watched the second plane hit. And when he told me that, and this was like months later, because we didn't have any contact with anybody. You know, you didn't know where everybody was. And so when that came out, we were like, are you serious? And he goes, dude, that was like the craziest thing to watch all that happen.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's still an amazement whenever he talks about it. But
Well, we certainly appreciate you sharing what happened, how you've seen it from your eyes on 9/11. Simply Wendy's popped in here with us. She I reached out to people from all around the country, was hoping I could get a couple ladies. So I certainly appreciate Misty and Wendy popping on. Several others wanted to, but they were either under the weather or different things. But, we got, someone off the West Coast here finally. I know
Yeah.
3 people are in Texas and one in South Carolina, and me and Teresa's in Arkansas. So, Wendy, we appreciate you. If you don't mind, just kind of introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you took that initial shock of learning of 9/11, please.
Well, I grew up in New Jersey, so I was always in New York City. And so, and then when I moved here to California, I'm getting a lot of feedback. I'm trying to, hold on. Are you getting feedback on your end?
No.
No? Okay. I keep hearing repeating, like I'm hearing myself repeat.
Okay. I think that was on Lee's. I think someone's playing the YouTube channel, but anyway, I muted his mic. So are you getting it now?
I'm still getting it.
All right. Let me mute everyone.
Okay. No, I'm still, okay. Yeah, no, I'm still repeating, but anyway, I'll just go on and I'll just hear myself talk twice. But,
Is her phone
my mother called me, and so it was 6 o'clock their time, and I'll just take my earphones out. It was 6 o'clock in my time and 9 o'clock at home. My mother said, turn on the TV. And I turned the TV on, and as I turned the TV on, I saw the second plane hit into the tower, and it just devastated me to the point I just didn't know what to do. It's like, oh my gosh, we're under attack. And do I send my kids to school? Do I not send my kids to school? I ended up sending them to school. But then later that morning, I got a call, and I learned that one of my family members had gone to a meeting in New York City in Tower 1. And I think he was in insurance, and he hadn't been to New York City in years. And just so happened on this day, he had to go. And unfortunately for him, he was early, and he was killed. His body was never recovered. I guess he was just crushed with all the debris. And to this day, every time 9/11 happens, I'm devastated, and it's just a horrible day. It's like almost like a PTSD response I get in a way, but so that's all I wanted to share. I lost a family member, and it just doesn't go away.
Yeah. Well, we certainly appreciate you sharing that with us, Wendy, and our heart goes out to you. And
thank you.
I
I wasn't sure if I really wanted to come on and share, but I thought.
Glad you did.
Yeah.
I had a cousin. Well, he's a distant cousin. He was there. He was in the second tower, and he spoke today at the state capitol about. He told his story. He's told his story all these years. He told it to my son's Cub Scouts. We've heard him tell the story many times. But he was in the second tower, and Morgan Stanley, he was there for training, and he lives in this area. Well, he's from this area, and he lives about an hour from here now. He's an insurance agent, but he was there for training, and Morgan Stanley had got in touch with his mom and his family and told them that he was safe, that he was in the second tower. And he was on the 61st floor, I believe that's right. And his mom turned the TV on just like the rest of us, and watched the plane crash into the second tower. so she spent most of the day waiting to hear. She just was devastated, because she and her family, they watched what we all watched. Mm-hmm. And so she thought her son was gone, but he made it down, and he's alive. And
wow, good for him.
He gives all the glory to God, and he has a great testimony. He really does. And
do you want to
he has
share
a beautiful
about
wife and 2 children, and he tells his story everywhere. And anyway, but I'm like Misty. I was at home. I worked for my brother, and was just working part-time, and I was at home with my son, who was 3 at the time, and I just held him. And there were some amazing things that happened afterwards about how close we all got to each other, and how we felt and how we treated each other. And it's sad that we've lost that again, but not all of it. But that's I think all of us felt that.
Yeah. Well, folks, if you don't mind, I'd like to share a little something with you before I ask our guest individually. I know Lee's kind of touched on it a little bit. Teresa's touched on it a little bit here too as well. But I'd like to ask our guest to kind of convey to us what took place on 9/12 and leading up till today a little bit. So let me share something with you here for just a minute, if you don't mind, and just want to read this to you. But this comes from the Naval History and Heritage Command. It talks about the 9/11 terrorist attacks, and of course there's a picture here with some flowers, roses. A bouquet lies on a bench at a National 9/11 Pentagon Memorial at the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia, September the 11th, 2019. But this article, and I'll link this in the description down in the show notes, and you're welcome to go check this out. And there's many other articles on the web that you can find. But this National Naval History article says, on the morning of September the 11th, 2001, 19 terrorists from the Islamic extremist group Al-Qaeda hijacked 4 commercial aircraft and crashed 2 of them into the north and south towers of the World Trade Center complex in New York City. A 3rd plane crashed into the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia. After learning about the other attacks, passengers on the 4th hijacked plane, Flight 93, fought back, and the plane was crashed into an empty field in western Pennsylvania, about 20 miles by air from Washington, D.C. The Twin Towers ultimately collapsed due to the damage from the impacts and subsequent fires. Nearly 3,000 people were killed from 93 different countries. Most of the fatalities were from the attacks on the World Trade Center. The Pentagon lost 184 civilians and service members, and 40 people were killed on Flight 93. It was the worst attack on American soil since the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor in 1941. After the Taliban refused to overturn the mastermind of attacks, Osama bin Laden, Operation Enduring Freedom officially began October the 7th, 2001, with American and British bombing strikes against Al-Qaeda and Taliban forces in Afghanistan. Initially, the Taliban were removed from power and Al-Qaeda was seriously crippled, but Allied forces continually dealt with a stubborn Taliban insurgency, infrastructure rebuilding, and corruption among the Afghan National Army, Afghan National Police, and Afghan Border Police. Bin Laden would go into hiding for nearly 10 years. On May the 2nd, 2011, U.S. Navy SEALs launched a nighttime raid on bin Laden's compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan, killing the Al-Qaeda leader. Operation Enduring Freedom officially ended December the 28th, 2014, although coalition forces remained on the ground to assist with training Afghan security forces. American troops departed Afghanistan in August of 2021. So there's the article, of what actually took place, the accounting of roughly how many people were killed, where, New York City, D.C., and then, of course, also the plane that crashed. There's many stories to tell on all of those as well. And so I just wanted to give some detail. And if you don't mind, folks, I'm going to open up, and then I'll start with the ladies again. But 9/12 for me, after the initial shock of 9/11, of course, like I said, we all rushed to our 2 little gas stations here in town and filled up with gas. And we all just gathered together. This is a fairly strong community. And what I mean by community is kind of like Lee was talking earlier about how people came together. It was amazing to see. And as Teresa alluded to earlier, it's sad that we've kind of drifted from that. It's sad that we have to have something like that to bring us together. And so, we have to be the ones to initiate, doing things like this to keep them from ever going away. Only we can do that, And so we try to help our community, especially our cooking community here. All of us join together. I mean, we've got a good friend with us here as a good example, and that's Lee. Lee has expressed to me many times how overwhelmed he is. When life happens, he's facing some situations that many of you know, and the cooking community has stepped up and tried to help a little bit. But folks, I mean, that's just what we need to be as Americans. That's what it means to be an American. And so many of you have heard me say about my dad being a POW of the Second World War. And if it wasn't for other members of the military that he was a part of, rising up, overthrowing their captors, and escaping captivity, and them carrying him to a French hospital to where he could be treated, had double pneumonia, frostbite, busted eardrums from shell shock. If it hadn't have been for that, I wouldn't be here talking to you. And so that's what it means. I actually reached out to Mike Baker of Baker's Barbecue, a friend of mine in our hometown. He wasn't able to join us tonight, but Mike actually went over to Afghanistan. And so I really wanted to kind of get his perspective on what the initial shock was for him on 9/11. But I want to just talk a little bit about 9/11, or 9/12, I'm sorry. Whether you're religious or not, it doesn't matter what, denomination or whatever your beliefs are, whether you have any or not. In our community, our churches and places like that really come together, and denominational boundaries or whatever, those walls come tumbling down, and that's a bad way to put it in light of 9/11, but that is the truth. We come together. We may have differences throughout the year, but if there's someone in our community that is struggling, or someone in our community that's up against it, or if there's a fire and they lose everything, or in this case, everyone come together. And as Mac was saying earlier, people came together and began to get on their knees and pray, because this was bigger than us. This was something that we in our lifetime has, and hopefully never ever again will experience. And it was a shock to the system, if you will. And for us, we all gathered together, and we just began to ask God, if you will, to help us, to guide us, to direct us what to do, and give the leaders at the time the wisdom and knowledge the guidance and direction of what to do and how to handle this. Now, like I said, this is not a political discussion, and whether they did or whether they didn't do what you think they should have, that's neither here nor there. They were there in a position at the time, and so you really can't judge what someone did or didn't do because you don't know what you're facing until you're in that position. And I wasn't in that position to make that decision. You know, they were. And so whether it was right or wrong, that's neither here nor there. But at least, you know, there were some things that were done. I think about, you know, one of the things initially, as I said, as I was working in Pollard, Arkansas, laying concrete block on a home for a young couple, and once I realized what was going on, it was just the one thing that really caught my attention was how quickly there were no more airplanes in the sky. Whoever made that judgment call to ground all the airplanes, you know, that was a smart decision. In my opinion. Now, I'm not, like I said, I don't want to get political here, but that was a smart decision to get them planes out of the sky, you know, because we didn't know, like I believe Mac said, we didn't know at that time with the military installations around all of our homes whether this was a national attack on our country. Not only just in New York City, but was this going to be a country? Was this going to be a national attack all over the country? And so I think the grounding of the planes was a smart decision. We got together, we all prayed, we helped each other. If anybody needed anything, there was a lot of people going through mental anguish. I'm sure many of y'all experienced that. There was a lot of people that were just traumatized, as Misty alluded to earlier. It was just something that none of us have ever had to deal with before, and hopefully, Lord willing, it's something that we will never ever have to experience again. Now, we're 20 years into this thing, and there's many people that may even be in here in the chat room that was not even born. As Teresa said, her son was 3 years old. Misty talked about her son. You know, Mac talked about his children, and Coleman as well. And Lee, you know, there's a whole generation of people today that was not, that had no knowledge of what really took place. So, you know, the thing that I'm most grateful for, and I'll shut up and let some of our other guests talk. I know, Teresa, I know I can just ramble on, but no, really, I mean, seriously, in all seriousness, it was just the community, and I don't use that word lightly. I mean, it was the be your brother's neighbor. I mean, we were being neighborly to people. And I think that's really what life is all about. And it's unfortunate that we had to have something like this to bring a reality check to all of us to come back to that center, if you will. We had to get centered and focus on what was really the most important. Because if we're not careful, we can get caught up in life, we can get caught up in making money, we can get caught up in making YouTube videos or whatever, you know. But really, it's the community, it's life, and it's treating your neighbor as you would yourself. And that's what, in my opinion, what it's all about. So, Misty, you care to share with us?
Let me unmute myself there. You know, right after we all watched it, we're talking about how close the country come together. Politicians, it didn't matter what party they were in, stood out on the Capitol steps and saying, "God bless America." And our president, like him or not, he stood up there and said, "I hear you." And pretty soon the whole world is going to hear you or hear us. And I've never in my life been more proud to be an American. I mean, I'm a Texan through and through, and usually Texans say we're Texans first, right? But at that moment, we were all Americans. You cried with each other in the grocery store with complete strangers. Right. It didn't matter. Everybody was quick to give a hug and say, "I'm with you, I hear you, I feel you." And never in my life have I ever experienced such a sense of unity. Y'all remember the Alan Jackson song, right? Where Were You? Every year I listen to it, every single year. The first time I heard it, I had a little Dodge Dakota pickup. Kendra was in her car seat. We were going somewhere, who knows. But I had to pull over the side of the road. I was crying so hard. I mean, it was almost going to make myself sick because it expressed everything every one of us were feeling at the moment. And my daughter made the comment, was it yesterday, that I was like, Kendra, you need to come watch this. And she's like, Mom, we have been told every year in school growing up, y'all were the last kids that were alive at this point. Your younger classmates or classes behind you were not alive. And she said they have made us sit and watch the whole thing. They've got the video off that shows real time everything that was happening and the calls from the pilots, all that stuff. But something else that to me, when passengers of Flight 93 all stood together, they didn't know what their other people's religion was. They didn't know what their political background was. They didn't know all this stuff. They knew they had to stop the terrorists from doing what they were going to do. And that is what being an American means. Right. That you are going to stand up. You don't have to be a soldier or an airman or anything. Everyday citizens stand up and say, I love my country, and we're going to do what we can. They all called their families, said, I love you. We may not make it out of this alive. And you heard all that stuff, and it made you so dang proud to be an American. Yeah. And I don't think, I think I've shared with you, Mike, I'm a granddaughter of a Bronze Star medal recipient of World War II. His tank blew up, and he saved all his men, right? I am a daughter of a airman that served in Vietnam. So I've always had a very big heart. I would have joined the military myself if I hadn't blown my knee out in my junior year of high school. But instead I went into corrections. I just, like everybody, I miss that. And I think at the heart of people, the heart of America, we're still there. We've just got to stop. Remember who we are as a country. Right. And not demonize each other, not all the things that people do. And I'm not trying to get political either. I loved who we were on 9/12. For that next year or whatever, we stood united at a common enemy, and we were Americans first. And I miss that. And it breaks my heart to watch people, Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that, Misty. Mac, you care to lay it on us how 9/12 and up? You're muted. From 9/12 on, how what took place in San Angelo, and how did you guys begin to face life after?
Well, it's like you said earlier. The lines for gas were long, and it's kind of the same thing that happened during the pandemic, where everybody kind of rushed to grab some things here and there. From what I remember, people were just didn't know what was going on. But I remember spending a lot of time in church, and nowadays everything's streaming, and you can sit at home and watch church or participate in church somehow and even chat in and stuff like that. But back then, we'd meet up, and I think that what they declared was a week of prayer. But one of the things that came out of this that was a very sad thing for me was that after all this happened, my daughter Kendra she was a little girl, and she had seen the videos over and over. She heard the sounds. She saw that, and we were driving down the road one day, and I kind of looked over to one side, and I accidentally hit. I didn't hit anything, but my tires went over the the area where you get too far over on the median or whatever, and it makes a little bit of racket, so you'll know that you need to correct where you're going. And that sound came on, and she heard it very loud in the vehicle, and I heard her in the back of the seat, and she said, "The terrorists." And her life was changed because of all that. And so when she'd hear a weird noise, she would think the terrorists. And so this whole time, I feel like our kids that were very small at that point and who knew anything about it really had some anxiety about things that were going on. Now, the unity that I saw was great, but you know, it's interesting to me that, you know, before that, a few days before that, people were arguing, obviously, about politics and arguing about the regular stuff that they argue about, and then all of a sudden, there's no more barriers. There's no more, you know, you're on that side and I'm on this side or whatever else. And the way I looked at it, I was like, wow, this is interesting that everybody will get together. And it made me wonder, what is God's purpose in this whole thing? You know? And, you know, I'm a believer, and I'm not a perfect believer. I'll have to tell you that. I mean, well, I guess none of us are, but, you know, for me, I have to be honest with my friends and with my family and say, I've failed a lot in my life. But that was definitely a moment of introspection where we're just looking at our lives and saying, God, is this the end? You know, after all that was happening, was there anything else going to happen? We were looking at things, and, you know, I wasn't a defeatist or anything like that. But at the same time, being a young dad, I was just thinking, what is the world, or what is this world that my kids are going to live in? Where are they going to go? And are they going to reinstitute the draft? Are my sons going to have to go and, you know, be involved in some wars and stuff like that? And I was concerned, of course, and I thought about it a lot. And 2001, you know, we were just starting to find out about my son JJ being autistic, and little by little, more and more was being found out. And so there were a lot of things that were up in the air for us as a family, as a church. But the one thing that I remember was that people cared about each other, and everybody was your friend. Now, I make friends all over the place because that's just the way I am. But at the same time, back then it was a lot different, and I don't know, that kind of spirit just hasn't been around anymore for a while, and it's sad. But I remember all of that, and that whole week we went to church pretty much every night, and we prayed, and, you know, we asked God for help, and we asked God for direction and for guidance. And, you know, people lean on different things and they do what they want to do. But for me, I just feel like we did what was natural to us, and really, to be honest, things for us became less traumatic after all that. And I feel like we did, you know, what we could do, and we tried to help here and there as much as we could with everything. And I don't know. I know that our church had started, you know, doing stuff to go send things for people who were hurting, and I know that there were a lot of prayers for folks. And you know, I still think about it, but like I said earlier, when it comes up, it's difficult for me to pay attention to it, because it stirs up a lot of sad feelings, and sometimes it's a little bit of anger and things like that. And then you're wondering, hey, what happened and what's transpired since then. I saw an article today about a lady that was there, and she was in one of the buildings, and I started reading the article thinking it was going to have a happy ending, and the fact is that it didn't. I mean, she was in the towers, she got out of the towers, and things were going. She made it, she lived, but in the end, she became so depressed that she ended up being a crack addict, and her life just was torn to bits. And it's sad that things like that happen. That something can. I mean, it's an extremely traumatic experience, and so for me, doing what we did, I think it really helped us through. And as a family, we made it. And my son Jonah, he wasn't born during that time, but he knows all about it. And my wife is a music teacher at school, so each and every year, it's something that she talks about at school to her students. So we never forget. And the reason we never forget is because we do bring it up and we do talk about it. So, Mike, I appreciate you bringing all this up for us and letting us discuss our feelings and things like that.
You bet, man. I appreciate you sharing that with us. Lee, I'm going to let you share your view from after 9/11 and what took place from 9/12 forward, and we'll let Coleman finish us out for tonight if you guys don't mind. So, Lee, just let us kind of know what happened after the initial shock.
Well, so I had to work that night, and we were completely dumbfounded and lost. Not sure what was going to happen, but you found out. What was amazing was you found out superheroes don't wear capes. Not all of them. That's when, growing up, being a firefighter, a police officer, that was a noble thing. It was a great thing. But watching what they went through and the selflessness that they charged into stuff that they couldn't even see what was going on. And one of the most powerful images that you saw was one of the firefighters that was kneeling in front of a cross that was in the rubble, and it like really humanized what real superheroes are. And ever since then, you pull over on the side of the road when you hear an ambulance, you hear a fire truck, you don't even know where they're at, you just hear the sirens and you pull over. You show them that little bit of respect. And I think a lot of that spurred from not only growing up in a small area and being courteous, but just the respect that you got from these people that I mean, they didn't know what they were walking into, and it made it okay to know that you didn't know what to do. And it brought up a lot of, these guys didn't know how to pray, but they showed you how to do it. So watching America kind of come around, our small town. I grew up in a small town, Ohio, and just watching the people come together. They were handing out flags. I mean, you go to the store, you went to Walmart and you bought the little 4 packs of flags, and if somebody didn't have one, somebody was willing to give you one. It was just one of those. And ever since that day, it's a pride thing to have the red, white, and blue up, and to say, I'm proud to be an American. The military hat, and have full respect for them. After that day, the police officers, the firemen, the paramedics, the nursing, all those people, man, they're up there with the superheroes like Superman and Spider-Man. complete respect for them. It's opened up a lot of doors, for people coming in, especially like now. People are feeling that those uh, professions are way more important than what you ever thought they were.
Yeah.
But I want to say cheers to anybody in those professions. Thank you very much to anybody who joined the military. I've got a lot of family members that have joined, and I got in contact with a lot of people afterwards. Some people I hadn't seen in years that have joined and joined because of this. And cheers.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Lee. Certainly do appreciate that. And folks, we're going to finalize out here with Coleman. We're going to let him share a little bit more about his story of what took place after 9/11, after the initial shock. So, Coleman, if you don't mind, just let us kind of know how you folks dealt with it there, and how it affects you now, even.
I mentioned earlier that I had a business there, but that wasn't who I was. I was a children's pastor there in San Angelo, and there was a lot of people going through trauma, and our church, just like Max said earlier, our church made a decision to open up and become a place where people can come that needed help. And it's amazing what God will do and where God will use you. And my business, we decided to stay open. We were a necessary business for communication. And it's amazing that the people that God brought to our business who just needed to talk. And God was bringing us customers every day, and we weren't ashamed of our faith. We weren't ashamed of who God was, and it was amazing that our customers knew that, and we would have customers come in all the time and would just need to talk and would just need to sit down and share their stories about someone they knew or someone they lost or whatever it was. So church is one place, but God's going to use you wherever you are, and that's one thing that we really need to remember. And I think that's something that I really learned from that situation, is that it's God used that whole situation to really bind us together, really, but also to reveal himself to a lot of people. And shortly after that, I sold my business and moved to New Mexico. And as it would be a year later, on September 11, 2012, I had a plane ticket in my hand, and I was scheduled to fly from Albuquerque, New Mexico to Reno, Nevada. And my boss that I was working for at the time decided she was doing a training, and we were all flying to Reno, and she didn't realize or forgot that was the day. And she called us all about a week ahead of time and said, "Hey, I'm going to go ahead and cancel the training. And I don't want to put you guys in a situation to have to fly on September 11th, 2002."
Yeah.
And we were on a conference call, and I spoke up, and I said, her name was Lisa. I said, "Lisa, don't do that. You cancel this, and we don't fly, they win. I'm not afraid to fly. I know if something happens, I know where I'm going to wind up. But my vote is we continue with life, and we go on, and I'm getting on a plane and going to continue to fly." And we did that. And we went ahead and continued the meeting, and went ahead and went on and continued with that. But years later, so a couple years later, I went through some life troubles and met my new wife, and her being from New York, I mentioned earlier, and her and I made a trip to New York City. I guess it was probably close to 8-9 years ago, 10 years ago maybe, and we went to Ground Zero. That was one of the places that we wanted to go, and it was a very humbling experience. The museum and the monument was not built yet. Any of you that have ever been there, there's a waterfall that falls down kind of from ground level down into a basement kind of thing that's surrounded by a wall with all the names of everybody that lost their life that day, and that was the only thing that was there at the time, and it was amazing. As soon as you walked on that onto the site, I remember I was there with my wife and I was holding her hand, and as soon as we walked on the ground, she started crying because that site was just so important to her, and she was so close to losing so many family members that day. But we walked on and walked up to the monument and just started reading names, and all the people that had lost their lives that day, and it was a very humbling experience for us. And then later we had an opportunity to go to the George Bush Library in the Dallas area. I don't know if anybody's ever had an opportunity to go to that, but there's a 9/11 room there, and as soon as you walk into the room, there's a piece of the Twin Tower building in the center of the room. And I as soon as her and I walked in the room, we both just started crying because it was just it was an experience, that knowing that what happened that day, and knowing that that's not something we ever need to forget. I'm still about to have some tears, but if you ever have an opportunity to go to New York City and stand on Ground Zero, you need to do it. But America hasn't lost that feeling. Has it been stifled a little bit? Probably, but America hasn't lost that feeling. We're still proud to be an American. I love being a Texan. I was born in Texas, but I'm an American, and I don't think that feeling has been lost. I don't think it has been stifled. And I know I can probably speak for everybody who's on this panel. They feel the exact same way that I do, but and God took a terrible situation and turned it into good, and that's I know it made an impact in my life.
Well, Coleman, I certainly appreciate that. And before we go, I've got Matthew with Teach a Man to Fish. Some of you may be familiar with him, you may not. We're going to interview him here in another few weeks. I don't even remember what date it is. I'd have to look at my calendar. But Matthew, we appreciate you being with us, buddy. We'll allow you to kind of tell us a little bit the initial shock that you received on 9/11. But we're actually talking about this segment of the show from 9/12 forward. But if you can briefly just kind of introduce yourself and let us know from your eyes, through your eyes, of what took place that day 20 years ago.
I don't know if it's coming through clear or not. Yeah, you'll have to give me a nod.
We lost you. Yeah, we just lost you then. I don't know what happened, but it kicked you out. If you can come on back in, we'll be glad to hear your viewpoint. But I want to thank everyone here on our panel tonight, especially hear him popping in. There he is. All right. I don't know what happened, but anyway, it kicked you out. But we get you back. That's technology, man. That's just show business, right?
I'm very, very rural, so that's one of the things that I wanted to jump on and see whether or not the stream works well through the network that I'm using. Is it coming through okay?
Oh yeah,
sure.
Yeah, we can hear you. Looking good. So
yeah, these are some powerful stories. A great discussion, and the memories that get cropped up, and I'll just add real quick, I had a 2-week-old baby at that point. I was 10 years into my Army Reserve career, and it completely altered the course of my life. In 2002, I was deployed in part of the invasion force into Iraq. I remember the resolve. I remember the unity, the linking in arms with all of us, knowing what needed to be done without a level of clarity that I've experienced since or experienced before that. It's defined generations. After that deployment, I was also an instructor of ROTC at Old Dominion University in Virginia as my reserve role. And to watch generations, that was probably about 7 or 8 years filling that role, and to watch those generations of young people, I was in my 30s at that point, knowing where they're going. When you hear so much about younger generations, I think it's kind of a tradition to look for the people above the age of 40 and 50 to look at younger generations and make judgments. And I absolutely went to bat for these young people that I saw entering into the service voluntarily, knowing where they were going, what they were fighting for. And at that point, it was what caused that. So when I say it's altered the course of generations, that's all of us, and that's across the globe. I interact internationally quite a bit, and just had conversations with people in Brazil and China, and people that I work with who their lives were altered as well. This is it's changed the planet.
Yeah, sure has, definitely has. Well, Matthew, we certainly appreciate you sharing your perspective on it. And folks, we thank everyone in our chat room. We're going to call it an hour. We've kept this a little long, but I think it was much needed. It's something that we should never forget. And, we need to keep this ever before us, and certainly teach our younger generation about 9/11 and what took place. Hopefully, Lord willing, this will never ever happen again in our lifetime, or ever for that matter. But just the lessons that we learned, and many people alluded to this tonight, of the community and of coming together from either a military standpoint, from Matthew speaking of that, but all just the people talking about churches and the communities as a whole. Lee talked about people at work. Coleman talked about his work, but just people coming together during trying times, during times that you just are not sure what to do and which direction to go in, and to think that we, as Americans, can come together. And like Misty said earlier, you may be Texan by heart, but you're still American, and we want to stand up for America. This is the greatest country that I've ever been in my life, and I think everyone else would agree to that. We're proud. We are proud Americans, and when something like that comes, knocking on our door, we stand up and take notice. We don't know whether we're going to be backed in a corner and having to come out fighting, which in some cases we do, or if we are backed in a corner and are able to kneel on our knees and pray and hand out, whatever we can hand out to our community to help them. But any and all of that is what makes us Americans, and I'm proud to be an American. I'm proud to say that. There's a lot of wrong in this world, and that's why I didn't want to have a political discussion in here. That's for another time. But we just want to honor and respect what has taken place 20 years ago. It's 20 years, guys. I mean, think about that. It's hard to fathom that 20 years already has gone by. But let us never forget. Let us always honor those that gave it all. Not willingly, some of them willingly, as Mac and different ones talked about how first responders ran into that situation, or Lee, I believe, touched that. But folks, let's respect that. Let's honor that, and give honor where honor's due. And so with that being said, folks, we appreciate our panel. We appreciate everyone in the chat room. You guys have a great day, and we hope and pray you have a great week. And Lord willing, we'll see you next week. We've got Stephen Strawn with Cast Iron Cookware going to be on with us next week. So we look forward to that. And we've got many people lined up. I know Matthew there, Teach a Man to Fish, is going to be on with us here pretty soon. So with that being said, you guys have a great week. It's Mike and Mrs. Cast Iron here. We'll see you guys later. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.